Hey guys, tonight we're diving straight into a story that's equal parts tension, subtle, betrayal, and that creeping sense of, wait, what just happened? You probably won't survive this story without feeling a twinge of recognition, because if you've ever lived with extended family, you know exactly how it begins. Small, almost invisible gestures that slice deeper than any outright argument could. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to watch the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. I'm speaking to you from my cozy living room in insert your city. Lights dimmed just so the hum of the fan turning up a gentle ASMR layer, making it almost impossible to look away. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's comfortably embark on tonight's journey. It starts innocuously. Breakfast, your safe zone, becomes the first battlefield. I pour coffee, the steam curling toward my face, and there she is, my daughter-in-law, smiling in that way that doesn't quite reach her eyes. She comments on my pancakes. "Oh, I didn't know you liked them burnt," she says, almost too casually, like she's inventing a new reality just for me. A small joke to the untrained eye, but everyone who has lived with in-laws knows microaggressions at breakfast are the most effective kind. People still debate whether these tiny, repeated slights actually cause lasting resentment or just train you to smile through the tension, but trust me, they do both. I glance at my son, who seems oblivious, scrolling through his phone, earbuds, in like a modern-day shield. It's fascinating mainstream family dynamics suggest that the middle child, or in this case the partner caught in the middle, often becomes the invisible referee. But here's the fringe piece. Some cultures have an old custom dating back centuries, where daughters-in-law are subtly tested for patience and endurance in the first months of cohabitation. The goal isn't cruelty, it's survival, socially speaking. Knowing this doesn't make the eggshells easier to walk on, but it's a lens to frame the chaos. The day progresses, but the tension lingers, settling in the corners of the kitchen, in the scrape of silverware against plates, in the soft sighs of the dog who senses the household's emotional weather. I notice her laughing at nothing, a little too sharp eyes flicking toward me, waiting for acknowledgement, or perhaps a reaction. Oddly enough, there's a physiological response to this kind of persistent scrutiny. You feel your own heartbeat in your throat, your hands tingling a cocktail of adrenaline and anxiety. I sip my coffee, letting the heat ground me, and make a mental note: observation is key. Remember that cruel laugh in the hotel lobby? This is the domestic version of that same energy. Lunch comes and I retreat to my study under the pretense of work. Papers, invoices, reminders of the mundane, but they become my fortress. Yet even here, the tension follows like an invisible specter. She calls in that casual, honeyed tone, asking for minor favors, then subtly judging the phrasing of my responses. Each word measured, each pause loaded. It's astonishing how social dynamics evolve in the home. What's whispered at the dinner table can echo louder than a shouting match. Oddly, I recall reading about inheritance laws in a tiny jurisdiction where even minor disagreements over household etiquette can affect property succession if documented by witnesses. It seems absurd, almost like a plot from a soap opera, but legally it's a reminder that families operate on multiple planes at once: emotional, social, and yes, occasionally financial. I chuckle softly to myself, 3 light jokes so far, right, thinking about how absurd it is to measure pancakes like legal contracts. But it's funny, only if you're not the one getting cut down. By mid-afternoon, I make my way to the living room. The sunlight shifts across the carpet, highlighting dust motes, each sparkling as if to mock the tension in the room. I start sorting mail, opening envelopes, pretending to be absorbed in trivial tasks when I notice a slight tilt of her head. The look says, "I see you. I see everything." It's the unspoken communication that families excel at, where words are optional and gestures carry full weight. People still debate whether such silent strategies are conscious or instinctual, but either way, they work. I decide to make a cup of tea, the steam rising like a soft barrier between us. The kitchen becomes a theater. She slices fruit with surgical precision. I pour tea with deliberate calm. Every movement choreographed, yet the tension dances in between. I can almost feel it coiling around my spine. There's something primal about this. Humans have been negotiating domestic power for millennia. And here I am, modern and rational, caught in the oldest game in existence. Dinner approaches, and she offers to set the table. I let her control over table placement is her subtle domain, one she claims without a word. Yet as I place cutlery, I notice her hand brushing slightly closer to my space than needed a silent assertion. I take a breath. Mainstream advice says, do not engage, remain neutral, smile politely. Odd fringe advice from an obscure etiquette manual suggests silently moving objects back subtly, as if the household is a chessboard. I consider my options. 3 light jokes have been planted in my inner monologue like seeds in a tense soil, helping me survive the theater without exploding. Evening settles the sky painted in the bruised hues of sunset. She stands near the window, hands folded, a picture of civility that hides subtle hostility. I think about the odd rituals my grandmother spoke of, how in some cultures, tea ceremonies were a test of endurance, patience, and observation. Tonight, our breakfast slights and lunch microaggressions feel like that same ceremony evolved for a modern apartment. And as I sip the last bit of tea, I realize the story is only beginning. A soft breeze from the fan whispers through the room, almost as if the universe is giving me a moment to exhale. I know tomorrow it will escalate, but tonight I have observed, I have endured, and I have survived. Remember the small things in family life, the glances, the laughter, the tiny comments carry the weight of mountains. I'm ready for the next step. The next morning begins with a quiet tension, the kind that hovers in the corners like dust you can't quite sweep away. I wake to the faint hum of the city outside, birds flitting across my window, the sunlight teasing the edges of the curtains. But inside, the air feels thick with anticipation. I pour myself coffee, the aroma grounding me, and notice that she's already up moving with the same precise, measured steps that make my skin crawl. Breakfast is a battlefield again, but today there's something different, an envelope sitting in the middle of the table. No markings, no note, just a plain manila envelope, as if it appeared by magic. I pick it up, and there it is on confidential documents. Financial statements, household bills, and most intriguing papers detailing some minor accounts that I had assumed were under my management. My heart quickens, but I stay calm. This is not panic, this is observation. People still debate whether confronting someone immediately or waiting for the right moment is the better approach. The ethical argument is as tense as the domestic one. Do you act impulsively, or do you orchestrate a measured response? As I leaf through the documents, I realize they reveal more than just accounting. They hint at her attempts to exert control over family finances, quietly maneuvering to assert dominance in ways no one else would suspect. She's clever, meticulous, and her silence is part of her weaponry. Oddly, I recall a small fact from an obscure inheritance law in some states. Even subtle financial manipulation by a spouse or in-law can impact joint property rights if it's documented and witnessed. It's almost comical in a dark sort of way that pancakes, coffee, and tiny gestures at breakfast could have legal consequences. I chuckle softly, remembering the little jokes I planted in my head yesterday, and sip my coffee to hide a mix of nerves and amusement. She notices me holding the envelope and tilts her head, smiling that practiced, slightly insincere smile. "Oh, I didn't know you were looking through mail already," she says, voice dripping with sweetness that doesn't reach her eyes. I place the papers back down slowly, measuring my reaction. It's a game she loves, the subtle assertion of control, the thrill of silent humiliation. Mainstream family dynamics suggest that people in her position often seek micro-acknowledgement, tiny signs that they've unsettled you. Oddly, in some cultural customs, daughters-in-law were historically tested for cleverness and patience through small repeated slights, a relic of ancient social hierarchies. People still debate whether these customs are cruel or simply strategic. Either way, they shape behavior. By mid-morning, I retreat to the study documents in hand, contemplating my strategy. I have to be careful. The lawyer is still a distant possibility, a call not yet made, but I know that if these documents fall into the right hands, they could change the power dynamics in the house entirely. I glance at the clock. Each tick is a heartbeat, each second, weighted with anticipation. She comes by the study door smiling innocently. "Just checking in," she says. But I sense the hidden message. "I see you, I know what you're doing, and I'm waiting." I put the papers away, making a mental note of which documents matter most. There's something almost archaeological about sorting through family secrets. You unearth layers of intention, subtle gestures, and unspoken rules that date back generations. Fringe anthropology aside, even the most ordinary households harbor invisible codes of power. 3 light jokes flit through my mind: the absurdity of measuring loyalty by who folded napkins correctly, the comedy of legal strategy hiding behind fruit placement, and the irony of surviving family warfare one breath at a time. Humor, even subtle, is a survival tool. Lunch is quiet, punctuated by the hum of the fan and the distant traffic outside. She serves salad with deliberate precision, glancing my way every so often to ensure I notice the perfect alignment of plates. Micromanagement wrapped in civility. I notice the way she positions the silverware, the slight lean of her head, the fleeting raise of an eyebrow. All these tiny gestures, unnoticed by outsiders, convey volumes. People still debate whether such silent cues are learned behavior or instinctive. I sip my tea, savoring the calm but alert to every flicker of expression. Mid-afternoon brings a surprising twist. I receive a call, not from her, not from my son, but from a lawyer I vaguely recognize from past family matters. The voice on the other end is formal, businesslike, but carries a hint of curiosity. They mention documents, recent shifts in family finances, and a possible meeting. My pulse quickens, not in fear, but in anticipation. The law that distant impersonal authority now intersects with our domestic battleground. There's an odd satisfaction in knowing that external structures can validate internal suspicions. Fringe trivia in some legal traditions, lawyers are allowed to act on even minimal evidence of family mismanagement, a rule unknown to most households. I hang up and take a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and tension. The lawyer's involvement is a game changer, a shift in dynamics that transforms silent strategies into potential legal ramifications. She enters the room at that exact moment, smiling, carrying a small tray of tea. I place my hand on the envelope, deliberately visible, and sip slowly. She notices, of course. Micro-expressions, slight flicker of surprise, then recovery. The psychological chessboard is set, and every move counts. By evening, I've organized the documents meticulously, making notes highlighting areas that reveal her attempts to influence finances subtly without overt confrontation. I think about the rituals of patience and endurance that families have employed for centuries: subtle observation, strategic silence, careful documentation. Odd customs like maintaining detailed daily logs of interactions in some cultures might seem extreme, but they provide a roadmap through complex emotional landscapes. People still debate whether such vigilance is paranoia or prudence. Dinner arrives a quiet, tension-filled affair. She serves with grace, but the air is thick with the unspoken knowledge of discovery. I glance at my son. He notices nothing engrossed in his phone, but I feel the weight of the documents, the potential exposure of carefully laid plans. I keep my tone light. 3 small jokes slip out, naturally, observational, ironic, harmless, yet each one underscores that I am aware that the power balance is shifting. As the night settles, I sit back, reflecting on the day. Small gestures, subtle manipulations, hidden agendas, all observed, documented, and ready for the next phase. The day has revealed the depth of her strategy and the quiet influence of silent power in family dynamics. There's an anticipation in the air, the kind that makes you sit a little taller, breathe a little slower, and watch closely. And so as I sip the final cup of tea, listening to the fan's gentle whir, I prepare for the next step: confrontation and revelation. Tomorrow promises tension strategy and the subtle unfolding of power as hidden documents begin to rewrite the unspoken rules of the household. Tonight I rest, but my mind is alive, alert, and ready. Dinner the following evening feels like walking into a theater where every gesture is scripted, every glance a line in a silent play I never auditioned for. I step into the dining room, the aroma of roasted vegetables and baked chicken filling the space, and notice her immediately the way she adjusts the tablecloth with tiny, precise tugs, as though it were part of a larger, invisible design. The air is thick, but she moves with a practiced grace, giving nothing away yet somehow conveying a subtle, relentless challenge. People still debate whether such micromanagement is conscious manipulation or just habit, but anyone who has shared a home with a daughter-in-law of her caliber knows the weight behind every small gesture. I sit down, careful to place my napkin, just so a tiny rebellion of symmetry against her orchestrated world. The mainstream family dynamic in play is familiar, one member quietly asserting dominance through control of the mundane while others navigate the tightrope of civility. Oddly, some anthropologists have noted that similar behaviors existed centuries ago in households where power dynamics were enforced through indirect means like determining who carved the meat or served tea. It's curious, but in this moment, the past feels present. The simple act of setting a table has become a battlefield. Conversation begins innocuously. We discuss work, the weather, trivialities meant to distract from the underlying tension. But she peppers her remarks with slight digs. "Oh, I see you bought the cheaper brand of butter," she says casually, almost too casually, and I feel the familiar flicker of irritation rise. I respond with light humor, a joke about how my taste buds are sophisticated enough to know the difference, and let the comment pass without reaction. 3 light jokes in the past 24 hours, it's a survival tactic, a way to maintain balance while signaling awareness. Midway through dinner, I notice the slight alignment of the silverware again. She has shifted the knives slightly closer to her side, a subtle move that carries the weight of assertion. My internal monologue notes it, strategic positioning even inanimate objects, obeying unspoken hierarchies. Fringe fact, some inheritance laws in Europe historically recognized subtle dominance behaviors as evidence of influence over household resources. Strange as it sounds in certain contexts, the tilt of a knife could reflect control over assets. People still debate whether applying these old principles to modern life is ridiculous or insightful, but tonight it resonates a little too clearly. I sip my wine, the warmth grounding me as I mentally catalog the day's observations. It's fascinating how much energy the human mind dedicates to scanning for power dynamics, gestures, tones, micro-expressions. She smiles at the children who giggle at something trivial, oblivious to the silent war in which they are unwitting witnesses. Mainstream psychology notes that children often mirror these behaviors unconsciously, learning strategies of negotiation and assertion without realizing it. Oddly, it's like teaching miniature diplomats through observation and imitation. As dessert is served vanilla custard with a drizzle of caramel, she leans forward slightly, tilting her head. That subtle motion signals attention focus, perhaps even scrutiny. My fork pauses mid-air. I'm acutely aware of the air currents in the room, the faint hum of the ceiling fan, even the distant barking of the neighbor's dog outside. In moments like these, ordinary sounds become amplified, each one punctuating the tension. People still debate whether awareness of environmental cues is conscious or a survival instinct, but tonight it feels vital. After dessert, she suggests clearing the table together. I agree, moving deliberately mindful of each interaction. She positions plates and glasses with meticulous care while I handle the utensils. We move almost in synchrony, a silent choreography of domestic diplomacy. Oddly, I think of cultural rituals where teamwork in household tasks was a test of compatibility or endurance. While we're not following any centuries-old rite tonight, the echoes of those practices resonate in the rhythm of our movements, each action layered with unspoken meaning. Suddenly, a casual comment from her cuts through the rhythm. "I noticed you didn't adjust the heating this morning. It felt a little chilly." The words are innocent, but the implication lingers. It's criticism wrapped in politeness, a familiar tactic in family power plays. I nod and smile, letting the remark pass, but internally I catalog it as data. Every interaction, every slight is part of a larger mosaic of influence and control. 3 more jokes flit through my mind, small, internal, protective, about the absurdity of counting degrees on a thermostat, the comedy of perfectly aligned plates, the irony of silent manipulation cloaked in sweetness. Later, I retreat to my study documents in hand. The envelope from earlier remains unopened, a potent symbol of latent revelation. I review what I've gathered, minor adjustments to household bills, subtle interference with shared accounts, strategic placement of items to assert dominance. The lawyer's potential involvement lingers like a storm on the horizon, a distant authority ready to intervene. Fringe fact in some legal systems, documentation of such behavior can influence settlements or inheritance disputes. People still debate whether family members should ever involve external authorities in what appears to be purely domestic conflict. I set the documents aside and reflect on the oddities of domestic power dynamics. The ordinary routines, meals, chores, small comments have become weapons and shields in this subtle warfare. The humor I've cultivated through light jokes and internal monologues softens the edges, allowing me to navigate the terrain without immediate confrontation. Mainstream advice emphasizes patience and observation, while fringe strategies suggest meticulously documenting interactions. I combine both, blending awareness with subtle record-keeping, readying myself for the moments that will demand action. By nightfall, the tension remains but feels contained like a coiled spring. I sit by the window watching the city lights flicker, the faint hum of the fan, providing a gentle counterpoint. Her laughter from the living room, bright, melodic, yet sharp beneath the surface, reminds me that tomorrow will bring another round, likely more pointed, more deliberate. The landscape of domestic strategy is vast, layered, and occasionally absurd, but it is navigable with patience, humor, and awareness. I sip a final glass of water and smile softly, thinking about how small gestures, tiny shifts in posture, fleeting expressions can carry immense weight in the quiet battlegrounds of family life. Tonight, I rest document in mind strategies forming quietly in the shadows. Tomorrow, the subtle war escalates, the lawyer's call looming as a potential catalyst, and the envelope waits, holding secrets that could tip the balance. The first skirmishes have set the stage, and I am ready, alert, and quietly amused by the theater of domestic power. The morning light creeps across the bedroom curtains, soft and golden, but inside me, the tension hums like an electric current. I sip coffee slowly, savoring the heat, letting it anchor me as I prepare for what I sense is coming. Today is different. The lawyer's call from yesterday hangs in the air, a distant drumbeat, signaling that the quiet battlefield of small gestures is about to collide with the blunt instrument of authority. I glance at the envelope still lying on the desk, untouched, but potent like a sleeping dragon. People still debate whether involving legal counsel in family disputes is wise or excessively dramatic, but in this household, it feels inevitable. Breakfast begins with ritual precision. She enters the kitchen with a confident sway, arranging plates and cutlery, as if performing an elaborate dance only she knows the steps to. The mainstream family dynamic at play is obvious. Now she's testing boundaries, gauging reactions, subtly asserting control. Oddly enough, in certain cultural customs from Eastern Europe, daughters-in-law were historically assessed on their ability to manage the household efficiently, using silence and observation as a form of power. That knowledge doesn't ease the sting of her barbed comments, but it reframes them, transforming them from personal attacks into calculated moves in an age-old game. I notice her glance at the coffee machine, a fleeting, almost imperceptible tilt of the head. In another context, this would be meaningless, but in our household, it's a question. Have you noticed my control yet? Have you acknowledged it? I pour my coffee deliberately, taking extra care not to spill and allow a small smile to touch my lips. Humor has become my shield. 3 little internal jokes pass through my mind, one about the absurdity of negotiating breakfast like a high-stakes boardroom, one about her precision being worthy of a Swiss watch, and one about my own exaggerated awareness of every micro-expression. They keep me grounded. The call from the lawyer arrives mid-morning. I step into the study, the envelope in hand, as if holding a talisman against the storm. The voice on the line is calm, measured, yet carries a subtle note of anticipation, like a musician poised before the first chord. "We need to discuss the documents regarding the household accounts," they say. My pulse quickens not from fear, but from clarity the storm I sensed is arriving. I glance toward the dining room where she casually folds a napkin, unaware that the external authority is about to intersect with her carefully orchestrated internal campaign. We arrange a meeting and I prepare meticulously. The documents are sorted, highlighted, and cross-referenced. Every subtle shift in her prior actions, the minor manipulations of accounts, the sly positioning of household items, even the microaggressions at meals now reads like a roadmap. Fringe fact: in some jurisdictions, silent, persistent interference with joint finances can have legal implications if documented. People still debate whether this should ever be enforced, but tonight the weight of possibility gives me a quiet thrill. Lunch passes with deliberate normalcy. She moves like a conductor orchestrating dishes, smiles, and subtle jabs. I maintain a calm exterior, noting each gesture, each tiny tilt of her head. The mainstream understanding of family dynamics suggests that patience is key. Reacting directly only escalates tension. I follow that advice, letting her reveal her hand fully while keeping my observations meticulous. Oddly, I think about historical rituals of endurance, where household hierarchies were tested daily through silent, repetitive tasks. It's almost comforting to know that such practices have precedent, even if they're centuries old. Mid-afternoon, she approaches the study door with a question about bills. I answer carefully, keeping my tone neutral, hiding the thrill of knowing the lawyer is already briefed on these minor but pivotal maneuvers. Her smile falters slightly, subtle but noticeable, and I make a mental note. Humor, again internal this time, 3 light jokes bouncing silently in my head about the absurdity of tax documents as instruments of psychological warfare. The meeting with the lawyer arrives in the early evening. I open the envelope, laying the documents before them. The air thickens, the hum of the ceiling fan now sounding like a prelude to the main act. The lawyer scans the papers, nodding thoughtfully, asking clarifying questions. As they do, I realize how the ordinary routines, the breakfast, microaggressions, the subtle manipulations, the careful folding of napkins have transformed into evidence of strategy, intention, and influence. People still debate whether bringing a legal perspective into domestic matters ruins relationships or preserves them. Tonight, it feels like the latter. She enters the room unexpectedly, perhaps sensing that something is unfolding beyond her control. Her expression is curious, mildly alarmed. I offer a polite greeting, careful to maintain an air of casual composure. The lawyer looks at her, then at me, and begins outlining the implications of the documents. The subtle shift in power is palpable. She moves from confident orchestrator to observer, forced to reckon with the reality she had quietly manipulated for weeks. Odd custom in some traditional households, exposure of one's tactics before a neutral authority was considered a moment of shame, but also of clarity. People still debate whether shame is a useful motivator or a destructive tool, but tonight it shapes the room's energy. Dinner that night is markedly different. She's more subdued, her earlier assertiveness tempered by the invisible authority of law and documentation. I notice small gestures of reflection, moments where her eyes linger on documents, perhaps recalculating strategy. Mainstream advice about family dynamics emphasizes that power is fluid, that observation, patience, and timing are crucial. Fringe insight. Ancient households sometimes use silent mediation to prevent escalation. Introducing a neutral observer could be considered a modern iteration. I sip my tea slowly, 3 light jokes passing through my mind about the irony of paperwork altering human behavior, the humor of silent dominance, and the absurdity of measuring influence by who poured the coffee first. By nightfall, the tension settles into a softer hum. The envelope lies between us like a bridge, its contents no longer a secret, but a shared reality. She glances toward it, a flicker of acknowledgement, and I smile faintly. The landscape of domestic strategy has shifted. Silent manipulations have met external authority, subtle gestures have encountered documentation, and the quiet war of microaggressions has intersected with legality. Tomorrow, the next phase will unfold. Confrontation at the kitchen table, observation giving way to direct revelation. I sit by the window, watching the city lights sparkle, fan humming softly, reflecting on the layers of today's dynamics. Subtle humiliation, legal oversight, and patient observation have created a new equilibrium. I prepare for the coming days, knowing that each move now carries amplified significance. The stage is set, the players aware, and the next act promises both tension and resolution, with lessons about patient strategy and the quiet power of observation. The morning unfolds like any other sunlight, slipping through the blinds and painting lines across the kitchen floor, but the atmosphere is charged with a quiet electricity. I pour my coffee, savoring the warmth, letting it anchor me before the inevitable confrontation. Today, the documents, the lawyer's involvement, and weeks of silent observation converge into something tangible. People still debate whether morning routines can influence mood, but in households like mine, even the simplest gestures, pouring coffee, placing a plate, become tactical maneuvers. She enters the kitchen with her usual precision, aligning the chairs, perfectly smoothing the tablecloth in a way that seems harmless to an outsider, but carries a subtle assertion of dominance. The mainstream family dynamic is clear. Her confidence stems from an intimate knowledge of our habits and boundaries. Oddly enough, in some cultural customs, daughters-in-law were historically observed and assessed during daily chores, the smallest misstep noted as evidence of character or influence. Tonight, centuries-old rituals meet modern reality, and I am acutely aware of each movement she makes. I set the documents on the table deliberately, partially visible, an invitation for acknowledgement. She glances at them, lips pressing together ever so slightly, a micro-expression that signals curiosity mixed with calculation. I sip my coffee, the warmth grounding me, and let 3 light jokes float through my mind. The absurdity of family power struggles over fruit placement, the irony of a legal meeting influencing breakfast, and the humor in silently cataloging microaggressions like a scholar of domestic warfare. The confrontation begins subtly, as these things often do. I ask a casual question about one of the bills, carefully phrasing my tone to be neutral, yet probing. She responds smiling faintly, but I can sense the defensive edge in her words. It's a delicate dance. Mainstream psychology notes that family conflicts often escalate when direct confrontation occurs too early, but patience and strategic observation can shift dynamics dramatically. Fringe fact: in some European traditions, an elder would quietly challenge a younger household member in subtle ways to reveal intent or honesty. People still debate whether such methods are cruel or effective, but tonight I understand their utility. I place a cup of tea in front of her, letting my gesture signal calm authority. She reaches for it, hesitates slightly, and then takes it, eyes flicking to the documents. Her subtle hesitation tells me she's recalculating strategy, processing the ramifications of weeks of covert manipulation now exposed to scrutiny. Oddly, this moment reminds me of old rituals where shared tea symbolized acknowledgement, agreement, or acquiescence, tiny acts with amplified meaning. Conversation flows naturally, but each word carries subtext. I ask about the children's schedule, a simple query, yet it serves as a probe. She responds with attentiveness, slightly more formal than usual. I note the micro-adjustments, the tilt of her head, the pace of her speech, the way she arranges utensils mid-answer. People still debate whether subtle body language is learned or instinctive, but in domestic power struggles, it is as effective as any direct confrontation. Mid-morning, I present the first set of documents for discussion, highlighting discrepancies and patterns, without accusation, simply stating facts. Her eyes flick toward each page, scanning, calculating. The mainstream understanding of family dynamics suggests that presenting objective evidence reduces emotional escalation, and oddly, this seems to hold true. Fringe insight in some legal traditions. Indirect presentation of evidence without accusatory framing encourages admission and acknowledgement. People still debate whether indirect confrontation is manipulation or diplomacy, but tonight it is clarity itself. She shifts slightly in her chair, the faintest sigh escaping her lips. I notice the subtle shift in her posture, the way her hands tighten briefly around the cup. Tiny indicators of recognition and perhaps apprehension. I continue calmly detailing the implications of her previous actions, never raising my voice, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. 3 small jokes in my mind about the absurdity of cataloging napkin folds, the humor in legal papers dictating domestic hierarchy, and the irony of using observation as evidence keep me grounded and inject lightness into the tension. As the conversation progresses, other family members enter the room drawn by curiosity. Their presence amplifies the stakes, but also provides subtle support. People still debate whether having neutral witnesses in family conflicts helps or hinders resolution, but tonight it lends gravity and accountability. Oddly, some ancient customs mandated that family elders silently observe disputes to ensure fairness, a ritual echoed now in modern households by passive but attentive onlookers. Her defenses start to waver subtly. Facts carefully presented and without overt judgment expose the scope of her attempts to control finances and domestic decisions. I notice her hands relaxing slightly, the slight shift of weight from one foot to another, small, almost imperceptible signs of acknowledgement. The lawyer present as an objective authority nods occasionally, adding weight to my observations without saying a word. Mainstream family advice suggests that impartial intermediaries often prevent escalation, and in this room the theory proves true. By midday, the confrontation reaches a quiet but significant peak. She makes a minor admission, not verbally dramatic, but indicated through subtle gestures, a nod, a brief intake of breath, a softened expression. I sense that the balance of power has shifted not through anger or force, but through strategic patience. Meticulous observation and carefully curated documentation. Odd ritual in some traditional cultures, acknowledgement without words was considered more binding than verbal confession. People still debate the ethics and efficacy of silent acknowledgement, but tonight it is the turning point. Lunch passes with an air of cautious normalcy. She serves food still precise, but with less calculated dominance. I notice small gestures of restraint, tiny pauses in speech, subtle eye contact that signals recalibration. My internal humor continues, light jokes about the absurdity of power plays over bread rolls, the comedy of silent micro-adjustments, and the irony of documents dictating emotional responses. The mundane has transformed into a stage for subtle but decisive revelations. By evening, reflection sets in. The confrontation at the kitchen table, conducted with calm evidence and strategic observation, has begun to unravel her silent tactics. The mainstream understanding of domestic dynamics emphasizes the importance of patience, observation, and indirect confrontation. Fringe insight, centuries-old customs of testing daughters-in-law through domestic challenges mirror the tension and eventual resolution unfolding here. People still debate whether such customs are beneficial or oppressive, but tonight they provide historical context to modern strategy. As night falls, I pour a final cup of tea and sit by the window fan, humming softly, reflecting on the day's events. The balance of power has shifted, subtle humiliation confronted, and the household landscape altered without raised voices or dramatic accusations. Tomorrow promises further revelation as quiet allies and legal authority intersect with lingering tension, moving us closer to clarity, resolution, and the ultimate lessons of patience, dignity, and strategic observation. The next morning arrives slower, as if the house itself is holding its breath. There's a new stillness, not the same tense silence from before, but something more thoughtful, uncertain, even cautious. She doesn't glide into the kitchen with her usual quick, confident steps. Instead, I hear her moving softly, measuring her presence, perhaps realizing that the equilibrium she once commanded has shifted beneath her feet. People still debate whether power in a household is truly spoken or if it always lives in the silences. Today, the silence feels like a reckoning. I pour my coffee, the scent wrapping around me like armor. As I stir in a spoonful of sugar, I notice that someone has already set out 2 cups, 2 spoons, 2 napkins. Her doing, no doubt, but this time it feels less like a territorial marker and more like a peace offering, a quiet attempt to reset the tone. Mainstream family advice says small changes in behavior are usually the first signs of emotional recalibration. But there's an odd ritual from northern Japan where family members who've been in conflict leave symbolic offerings, tea, rice, or fruit in the shared kitchen as a sign they're ready to talk without losing face. I look down at the cups and wonder if in her own way this is her version of that gesture. She joins me at the table, quieter than usual, eyes a little more focused. No sarcasm today, no little jabs, just 2 people sharing a kitchen, guarded and observant. She asks about the weather, then about the grocery list. It's mundane, but I sense the undercurrent. This isn't just small talk. It's reconnaissance. She's gauging where I stand, trying to measure how far the documents, the lawyer, and yesterday's kitchen table confrontation have moved the lines. But she's not the only one shifting. As the day unfolds, something unexpected begins to bloom support. Not loud, not theatrical. Silent, careful alliances that start to surface like roots just breaking soil. It begins with my eldest grandson. After lunch, while I'm wiping the counter, he leans close and whispers, "Grandma, I saw the way she talks to you. It's not okay." Just that. One sentence. But it sends a ripple through me. You see, people still debate whether children in households absorb tension consciously or unconsciously. But the truth is, they know. They always know. They may not have the vocabulary, but they read the room better than most adults. And when a child chooses to speak up, especially one that's been watching from the shadows, it carries weight. That quiet comment becomes my first clear sign that the power she tried to wield over me hasn't gone unnoticed. Later in the hallway, my son lingers longer than usual. He's always been distant in matters of conflict, what modern psychology would call a conflict-avoidant peacemaker. But today, his eyes are softer. He doesn't say much, just asks if I'm okay, then mentions casually, "I looked over the account changes." It's weird. No accusation. But that seed, too, is planted. Oddly, I remember a tradition I once read about from a Mediterranean island community. When a family conflict reached a critical point, it wasn't resolved through one dramatic showdown. It resolved through a slow build of silent solidarity, one person speaking, another nodding, then another offering a hand. It was called the gathering. No words of rebellion, just presence. I'm beginning to sense that happening now. By mid-afternoon, she's clearly noticed the shift. There's a flicker of something in her anxious energy, maybe even doubt. She tries to reset the social balance by asserting control in small ways again, rearranging the pantry, correcting someone's phrasing, offering unsolicited advice about how I cook rice. But each move feels more forced, less graceful. She's not used to playing without full control of the board. People still debate whether subtle social power is sustainable without reinforcement. And today she's feeling the absence of blind allegiance. At dinner, the table feels more neutral. My son offers to help set it. My grandson chooses to sit beside me. Even the dog, as silly as it sounds, curls up at my feet when he used to hover near her for table scraps. These small shifts aren't coincidence. They're silent declarations, and she knows it. I see it in the way she overcorrects her smile, the slight strain in her laugh, the way her eyes flick nervously when someone agrees with me. 3 light jokes float through my mind to stay grounded. One about how even the dog has joined the resistance. One about forming a silent alliance, like it's a spy movie. And one about starting a revolution through kitchen seating arrangements. They keep me from gloating. Because the truth is, I don't want to win, I want peace. I want dignity restored. I want the home to feel like a home again. After dinner, while she's in the other room, my daughter-in-law's sister stops by. A rare visit. She hugs me longer than usual. She doesn't say anything about what's going on directly, but she brings a pie wrapped in a dishcloth embroidered with my name. A message in the language of domestic diplomacy. Another ally, another stone in the wall rebuilding around me. And so the day ends not with fireworks, but with quiet reinforcement. The lawyer may have started the shift, but the momentum is now carried by family, by those who've seen, heard, and finally spoken. People still debate whether silent allies are more powerful than loud ones. I say yes. Because when people shift their weight behind you gently, without being asked, it tells you they've been waiting for the right moment all along. That night, I sit by the fan again, letting its hum become the lullaby of the day's strange peace. The kitchen confrontation didn't destroy anything, it clarified everything. And the ripple it caused is now gently returning to me as solidarity. Tomorrow, more truths will rise. Perhaps even the truth behind her need for control, her silent humiliations, her armor of perfection. But for tonight, I sleep knowing I am no longer alone at that table. There's something oddly still about the air this morning, like the house itself is listening. Not waiting, not bracing, just listening. I wake before the sun fully rises, drawn by an invisible thread of anticipation. It's not fear, it's readiness. Because today the document reveal is no longer a quiet shadow tucked in a drawer. Today it steps into the light. I make breakfast earlier than usual, not to please anyone, but because I want the kitchen to be mine this morning. Just mine. The kettle whistles gently. The smell of toast, real butter, and a hint of cinnamon fills the room. I place the documents neatly stacked and lightly clipped right at the center of the table. Not hidden, not covered, right there in the middle of the sunbeam. People still debate whether directness is the key to peace in a household, or if we should always keep the peace through avoidance. I've decided peace built on silence isn't peace at all. She walks in 10 minutes later, slower than usual. Maybe it's the smell that drew her in. Maybe she knows. Her eyes land on the papers almost instantly. She pauses barely a second, but it's enough. That pause is everything. She smiles, but it's brittle. Her voice floats out, smooth and neutral. "What's all this?" she asks, pulling her cardigan tighter like armor. I take a sip of coffee. "They're the statements, the ones you adjusted." There's no accusation in my tone, just air-clearing fact. I've learned that when you strip emotion from your voice during a confrontation, the impact is seismic. Mainstream conflict resolution models advise staying calm, factual, and present. Fringe strategies in some older European mediation traditions suggest speaking as if you're reading out loud to no one in particular, less threatening, harder to interrupt. I blend the two. She sits slowly, doesn't touch the papers. I don't understand what this is about. "Oh, I think you do," I replied gently, pushing the top page toward her. "That's the first account, the one you rerouted last spring, the one in Dad's name." Her face shifts, not drastically, just enough. A flicker in the eye, a downturn of the mouth. And there it is, the moment where reality unspools in silence. The kids aren't here this time. My son is at work. The house is still, and the weight of those pages might as well be a thunderclap. She finally speaks. "You're making a big deal out of something small. I was just organizing things. People still debate whether deception is always malicious or sometimes born of fear. I think it's both. And fear has its own scent. It rises from her now beneath the clean linen of her blouse and the polite tone of her voice. It's the fear of being caught, not necessarily of being wrong. You rerouted the account, I say my voice even. You redirected the gas bill, you changed the homeowner's insurance beneficiary form and didn't mention it." Now she touches the paper. Her fingers hover, then press as if trying to erase the ink with skin. "I didn't mean to." "But you did it." Silence. I let that sit. No rush. There's a strange, satisfying tension in stillness. People still debate whether letting someone sit with their own words is manipulative or necessary. I say it's grace. You're offering them space to find the truth inside themselves. Then footsteps. My grandson appears in the hallway. He stops sensing the tension. She stiffens, but I look at him and smile warmly. "Morning, sweetheart. Give us just a minute." He nods and retreats. Even at his age, he knows some conversations aren't meant to be shared. I didn't think anyone would notice, she finally says softer now. And there it is, the most honest sentence she's said in weeks. People still debate whether family secrets rot from the inside out or survive because they stay just below the surface. But they all surface eventually, always. She looks at me and I catch something rare vulnerability. Not performative, not strategic, real. Her voice wavers. I didn't think I'd have to fight for my place in this house, and that right there is the heart of it. She wasn't trying to destroy me. She was trying to root herself deeper, to make herself essential central. But in doing so, she tried to quietly erase me. Odd ritual I once read in a Himalayan village. Mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law perform an annual tea ceremony together where they speak only in metaphor. It's their only chance all year to air grievances without shame. It's called the meeting of mountains. Today feels like that, two mountains staring each other down, finally acknowledging each other's weight. I lean forward. You already have a place here. You didn't need to push anyone else out to secure it. She looks down. For the first time since I've known her, she doesn't have a comeback. Mainstream family therapists say that power struggles between women and families often stem from unspoken fears of being irrelevant, replaced invisible. People still debate whether these are generational wounds or simply the nature of proximity and pride. I was scared, she whispers. After he died, you became the center, and I didn't know where that left me. My heart tightens. Not out of sympathy, but recognition. I too once feared becoming invisible. We are not so different after all. I don't need to be the center, I say quietly, but I won't be erased. She nods slowly, a gesture of surrender, not in defeat, but in understanding. The rest of the day moves gently. She doesn't say much, but she doesn't avoid me. There's an unspoken truce, and the documents remain on the table until sunset, as if both of us need to see them one last time before letting them go. People still debate whether peace in families is built on confrontation or forgiveness, but sometimes it's neither. Sometimes it's just seeing each other truly for the first time. That night, my grandson finds me in the living room. He curls up beside me on the couch. I heard some of it, he says. I think you were really brave. I smile. You'll learn this one day, sweetheart. Bravery isn't always loud. And together we sit there, the hum of the fan in the background, the tension of the past weeks slowly dissolving like sugar in tea. If yesterday was a whisper of truth, today is the thunderclap. Family gatherings always promise some kind of performance, don't they? Everyone polishing their best smiles, hiding grievances under tablecloths and laughing just a little too loud. But sometimes the masks slip, and today, oh today, it all unravels in a way no one expected. The living room is filled with voices, chairs dragged across hardwood plates, clinking the scent of pot roast and rosemary filling the air. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone gathered for what's supposed to be a casual Sunday dinner. But the documents, those innocuous-looking sheets of paper, sit folded neatly in my handbag, humming like a live wire. People still debate whether family secrets should be aired privately or confronted in public. I never plan to expose anything here, but life has a way of choosing its own stage. It starts innocently enough. My sister-in-law compliments the flowers on the table, someone cracks a joke about traffic, and children dart around underfoot. Laughter fills the air, and then it happens. My daughter-in-law, with her perfected poise, decides to reclaim control. She lifts her glass and says with a smile, "You know, I've been managing most of the house's responsibilities these past months. Keeping things organized, bills paid, everything running smoothly." There it is, a subtle, gleaming blade disguised as praise for herself. She expects nods, applause, maybe even sympathy for the burdens she's supposedly carried. But instead, a silence falls quick, sharp, unexpected. My son looks at her brows furrowing. "Wait," he says, "what do you mean you've been managing the bills?" Her smile falters. Just slightly. Enough for me to feel the opening. I could let it pass. Keep the peace. But remember what I said. Silence isn't peace. And in that moment, the weight of weeks of humiliation, manipulation, and whispered control tips the scales. I place my fork down, softly wipe my hands with the napkin, and look directly at her. My voice is calm, steady, almost too soft for the room. She means the bills she rerouted into her name, the account she redirected without telling anyone, the insurance policies she tried to adjust. The silence cracks open like glass shattering. All eyes turn. Someone gasps. The children stop mid-giggle, sensing the shift. My daughter-in-law's face drains of color, then flushes crimson. She laughs nervously, too loudly. That's not I didn't. You're exaggerating. But then I open my bag, the documents carefully clipped and annotated slide onto the table like cards in a poker game. My son leans forward, scanning the pages, his lips tightening. He looks up at her. You really did this? She stammers. I was just trying to help. To keep things efficient. Odd ritual from old English households during disputes. Evidence, whether letters, receipts, or ledgers, was presented in front of the family as a way of restoring balance. The one who held proof was considered justified. People still debate whether that's justice or humiliation. Tonight it's both. Her hands tremble as she reaches for the papers, but it's too late. The whispers begin. The murmurs ripple like wind across a wheat field. My niece covers her mouth. My sister-in-law shakes her head slowly. And then, like an unexpected twist in a dark comedy, my grandson pipes up, his small voice cutting through the tension. Grandma showed me those papers yesterday. She said being brave doesn't always mean being loud. The room freezes. For a heartbeat, all you can hear is the clock ticking. And then it breaks. My cousin chuckles softly. Then my nephew outright laughs, not cruelly, but with the kind of disbelief that comes when a child drops truth like a pebble in a pond. Even my son smiles faintly, shaking his head. Out of the mouths of babes, he says. My daughter-in-law's composure shatters. Tears brim in her eyes, not crocodile tears, not performative ones this time, real ones. She covers her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Public humiliation has a strange power. It doesn't just wound, it exposes. And for the first time, everyone sees her not as the flawless orchestrator, but as someone desperate, fearful, flawed. Mainstream psychology says that exposure in front of a community forces a reckoning faster than private confrontation. Fringe anthropology notes that in tribal customs, shame was often used to realign someone with group norms rather than cast them out entirely. People still debate whether that's cruelty or compassion, but tonight I watch it work. She lowers her hands, her mascara smudged. Her voice cracks. I thought, if I didn't make myself needed, I'd be replaceable. It's raw, honest, painful, and in its own twisted way, liberating. The family responds not with cruelty, but with a mix of awkward laughter sighs and even soft reassurances. My sister-in-law leans across the table. No one's trying to replace you. You don't need to do all this. My son, though, visibly shaken, reaches for her hand. We just needed honesty. And me, I sit quietly watching the scene unfold, a strange cocktail of vindication and relief swirling inside me. 3 light jokes dance through my mind, keeping me from collapsing into tears myself. 1. About how I never imagined pot roast night would turn into a courtroom drama. 1 about how my grandson has better timing than most lawyers, and 1 about how mascara tears always win an audience faster than well-prepared documents. By the end of the night, the papers are no longer weapons but relics, lying quietly on the table among crumbs and wine glasses. She doesn't speak much after that, but her silence now feels different, not hostile, not humiliating, but reflective. The kind of silence that means change might just be possible. As I wash the dishes later, the hum of the fan in the background, I realize something important. The humiliation she tried to serve me, those weeks of tiny cuts and silent power plays, had circled back not because I lashed out, but because truth has its own gravity. It always surfaces. People still debate whether justice in families comes from patience, confrontation, or luck, but tonight I know it comes from endurance. From letting the truth breathe until it fills the room. And as I place the last dish on the rack, water dripping softly, I whisper to myself, she'll never laugh at me the same way again. The morning after the family dinner feels like stepping into a different house. Not because the walls have changed or the kitchen has somehow rearranged itself overnight, but because the air feels lighter. It's the kind of shift you can't see, only sense, like the difference between a storm about to break and the hush that follows after it finally has. For weeks, I've lived under the weight of her silent humiliations, the careful cutting gestures at breakfast, the rerouted bills and rearranged papers. But today, the balance is different. I don't walk into the kitchen bracing myself. I walk in with an odd sense of quiet relief. She's already there, of course, moving around in her deliberate, measured way. But something in her rhythm is off. Not broken, not hostile, just slower, softer. She doesn't comment on how I pour my coffee or the way I butter my toast. She simply places a plate of fruit on the table, says good morning, and sits. It's the most ordinary interaction we've had in months, and because of that, it feels extraordinary. People still debate whether public confrontations heal or destroy families, but sometimes airing the truth doesn't break bonds, it resets them. I sip my coffee, letting the silence stretch comfortably for once. She glances at me as if testing the waters, then, almost too quietly to hear, she says, "I didn't realize how much it had hurt you." The words hang in the air. It's not an apology exactly, but it's close enough to feel like a bridge. Mainstream family advice says you should never expect an apology exactly as you want it. Sometimes the smallest admission carries the deepest sincerity. Oddly enough, in certain rural traditions, reconciliation never came with a spoken sorry. Instead, families shared bread or fruit together as a ritual of moving forward. And here we are, a plate of fruit, between us two women acknowledging the scars in the simplest way. Later in the day, I find myself reflecting not on the humiliation or the anger, but on the strange customs and rituals that have always surrounded family hierarchies. Inheritance laws, for example, are not just about property. They're about recognition, legitimacy, respect. In some countries, if you can prove consistent contributions to household finances, even without formal ownership, you can claim legal rights. It's a fringe piece of information, but it lingers in my mind. Maybe that's why she did what she did, not purely to humiliate me, but to carve a place for herself where she feared she had none. People still debate whether that's selfishness or survival. And I wonder how often do mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law fall into this dance, not because they want to hurt each other, but because both are terrified of being erased. Generational conflict has always existed. The older one clings to her dignity, the younger one fights for her relevance. Neither wants to fade. Neither wants to be forgotten. And so the tug of war begins. I remember my own mother telling me how she endured the cold stares of her husband's mother, how every meal became a silent contest of who mattered more in the household. It was never about the soup, she once said. It was about the power. Still, people debate whether power in families is even real. Some say it's just an illusion, a shifting perception that matters only if you let it. But when you're the one being laughed at, belittled or erased, the illusion feels very real indeed. And last night, when the lawyer's papers lay open in front of everyone, I realized that sometimes illusions need to be broken for reality to return. By afternoon, she joins me in the garden, another small gesture of change. We water the plants together, silent but not hostile. The sun filters through the trees, dappling the soil with light, and I think about rituals again, how in some cultures, planting side by side after a conflict was a sign that the earth itself would hold the memory of reconciliation. Odd maybe, but comforting. The simple act of watering tomatoes together feels symbolic. At dinner that evening, the atmosphere is gentler. My son sits at the head of the table, tired from work but alert. He asks about my day, and for once she doesn't cut in or correct my answer. She listens, truly listens. It's subtle, but it's there. And for me, that's enough. 3 light jokes tumble through my mind as we eat, one about how even the tomatoes in the garden are witnesses to our detente, one about the dog switching allegiances too quickly now that the scraps flow evenly, and one about how if family disputes were Olympic events, ours would at least score points for creativity. As night settles, I retreat to my room and think about forgiveness. It's not easy, not neat. It doesn't mean forgetting the humiliation. It doesn't mean pretending the documents never existed or that her attempts to erase me weren't deliberate. Forgiveness, I realize, is simply deciding not to let the wound dictate the rest of the story. People still debate whether forgiveness is a strength or a weakness. To me, it feels like neither. It feels like choosing silence when the war has already been won. Before bed, I pass the living room and hear her talking softly to my son. Her voice is different, lighter, stripped of its sharpness. She admits she was wrong. She admits she was afraid. And though I don't step inside, I hear enough to know the fear that drove her to manipulate was the same fear that drives me to hold on to my dignity. We are both terrified of becoming invisible. Odd ritual from an old African tradition when conflict between women of different generations threatened the balance of the household. The entire family would gather at night and the women would sit facing each other by firelight. No one spoke. They just stared into the flames until one reached across and touched the other's hand. No words, just the fire. Tonight I imagine our fan as that fire, its hum, a reminder that sometimes silence can burn away what shouting never could. I lie down and let the day dissolve into dreams. Tomorrow the lawyer will return, the documents will be finalized, and the legal side of things will draw to a close. But inside, the shift has already begun. The humiliation she intended for me circled back not through anger or revenge, but through the weight of truth and the quiet courage of endurance. And maybe, just maybe, when people talk about us years from now, they won't say, they fought endlessly. They'll say, they learned to live side by side. Because families are messy, fragile, and endlessly debated, but they're also the only soil we have to plant ourselves in. And I intend to make sure ours fractured as it is still grows. The lawyer's visit is scheduled for late afternoon, but the weight of it hangs over the house all day. The morning is quiet, almost too quiet, like the hush before a theater curtain rises. I go about my routine slowly, deliberately, coffee watering the plants, checking the mail, but every small task feels amplified by the anticipation of what's coming. People still debate whether closure in family disputes comes from legal finality or emotional healing. Today, I sense we're about to taste both. She stays in her room longer than usual. I can hear her faint movements, the creak of drawers, the sound of her pacing. It's a kind of restlessness I recognize because I've lived it myself, the feeling of waiting for judgment, of knowing you can no longer hide behind silence. When she finally emerges, she's composed, but not in that brittle, rehearsed way I've seen before. Her face is bare of makeup, her clothes simple, vulnerable, and that, more than anything, tells me she's preparing to surrender to the truth rather than fight it. By noon, we're both in the kitchen again. This time, she doesn't try to dominate the space. Instead, she sets out 2 cups of tea, pours them carefully, and slides one toward me without a word. Odd ritual in some cultures, the act of pouring tea without being asked is considered a silent apology, a way of offering respect without the pride-wounding act of verbal admission. I take the cup sip slowly and let the silence be its own conversation. When the lawyer arrives, the air shifts. The documents neatly stacked on the table are no longer just papers. They're the culmination of weeks of quiet observation, whispered fears, and unspoken humiliations. He sits down, opens his folder, and begins to outline the adjustments restoring my name to the accounts, re-establishing the original beneficiaries, clarifying ownership of the house. Each word feels like a stitch repairing torn fabric. She listens, head bowed slightly, hands clasped in front of her. At one point, she interrupts softly, "I didn't mean to take anything away from her. I just thought, maybe I'd have some security if things changed." The lawyer doesn't comment. He simply nods, notes her words, and continues. People still debate whether lawyers in family matters are mediators or disruptors. Today he feels like a surgeon cutting away infection to let the wound heal. When it's done, there's no applause, no cheers, just the sound of papers being signed, initials scrawled, and pens clicking shut. The finality is not dramatic, it's steady grounding. The lawyer shakes our hands, packs up, and leaves. And just like that, the storm is over. After he leaves, she lingers at the table, staring at the papers as if they hold both her defeat and her release. Finally, she looks up at me. Her eyes are wet but clear. I know I can't erase what I did, but I want to do better. I nod. Not with triumph, not with condescension, but with something closer to quiet relief. Because the truth is, I don't want her destroyed. I want the home restored. Families don't need winners and losers. They need balance. Dinner that evening is subdued but peaceful. My son notices the shift, though he doesn't fully understand it. The children laugh again, their voices filling the spaces that were once heavy with tension. Even the dog seems lighter, curling at my feet as if sensing the calm. 3 light jokes pass through my mind, one about how legal documents have better timing than therapists, one about the dog finally declaring his loyalty, and one about how even casseroles taste better when served without side orders of humiliation. Later that night, I sit alone in the living room, the fan humming its steady rhythm. I think about everything, the small cruelties, the silent humiliations, the awkward confrontations, and the unexpected allies. I think about the odd rituals across cultures that mirror what we've just lived, the bread-breaking in rural villages, the fire-staring ceremonies, the silent tea offerings. And I realize that families everywhere, no matter the time or place, wrestle with the same fears to be seen, to be heard, to matter. People still debate whether dignity can ever truly be restored once it's been attacked. I believe it cannot through revenge or dominance, but through endurance and clarity. I glance toward her room and feel a softening. She tried to erase me, yes, but in doing so, she revealed her own fear of erasure. And maybe that's the strange gift buried in all this, her a mirror showing us that we are both fighting the same ghost. So tonight I let my voice soften even in my own head. The story doesn't end with fireworks or revenge. It ends with a whisper, with the slow, careful rebuilding of respect, with a house that finally feels like it can breathe again. And as I whisper this story to you, dear listener, I want to thank you for being here, for sitting with me through the tension, through the silence, through the unveiling of truth. You've seen how patience can bend humiliation back onto itself, how dignity can be reclaimed without shouting, how even broken families can find ways to stitch themselves back together. Now, as we close, I'll ask you to do something simple. Look around your own life, at your own relationships, and ask yourself, are there silences carrying more weight than they should? People still debate whether confronting them will break things apart or set them free, but maybe tonight's story nudges you toward the latter. So here's my good night. Thank you to my subscribers and to those who support this channel. Your presence here makes these stories breathe. May your evening be calm, your sleep be deep, and your own family table be a place of honesty, not humiliation. Now turn off the lights, let the fan hum if you have one, and drift into rest, knowing that even in the darkest corners of family conflict, dignity can still whisper its way back home. And now, as the story settles into its final moments, I want to slow everything down. Take a breath with me. Let it fill your lungs, then release it gently. The sharp edges of the confrontation are behind us now, the documents signed. The silence no longer weaponized, but softened into something almost tender. What remains is not victory or defeat, but a delicate balance. A reminder that family life, with all its jagged turns and hidden wars, can still bend back toward peace. You've walked with me through humiliation, through quiet endurance, through the lawyer's steady presence and the family's watchful eyes. And if you've stayed until this point, maybe you too carry scars from conflicts, unspoken, from rooms that hummed with words never said. I hope you felt less alone tonight, because families, messy as they are the soil where we are planted, and even when weeds grow thick, the roots still hold. Let me whisper this truth: you are not invisible. You are not replaceable. Your place in your story cannot be stolen. Even when others try to shift the balance, erase your presence, or laugh at your dignity, the truth has a way of circling back. So thank you truly to my subscribers and supporters who give me the space to share these stories. Without you, they'd remain shadows. With you, they find light. Good night wherever you are, in your living room, your bedroom, your quiet corner. May you rest knowing that every storm, no matter how long it lingers, eventually clears. And when it does, you'll still be here, whole, seen, enough. Good night.